meeting to order. Welcome everyone to meeting number 17 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on January 28, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person, please maintain physical distance of at least 2 meters from others, wear a non-medical mask when moving in the meeting room, and preferably wear a mask at all times, including when seated. Maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizers at the room entrance, and wash your hands well with soap regularly. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank all the members in advance for their cooperation. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee is resuming the study of immigration and refugee measures for the people of Hong Kong. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to again remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. For members wishing to participate in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Please make sure that before speaking, wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and the verification officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be on the mute. With regard to the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. With this, I would like to welcome our witnesses for today. We have Paul Evans, professor from the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs, University of British Columbia, appearing as an individual. We have Henry Chan, co-director for Saskatchewan Stands with Hong Kong. And we are also joined by two representatives from Immigration and Refugee Board, Rolla Itridge, Deputy Chairperson, Refugee Protection Division, and Heather Premier, Director General, Strategic Directions and Corporate Affairs Branch. Thanks to all the witnesses for appearing before the committee. All the witnesses will be provided 5 minutes for their opening remarks. We will start with Paul Evans. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You may please proceed. Mr. Clerk, do we have Paul Evans?
Yes, just joining now.
I think we will proceed to Mr. Chan, and then you can do the sound check for Paul Evans. So we will start with Henry Chan, co-director for Saskatchewan Stands with Hong Kong. You can please begin. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is, of course, a great pleasure to appear before this committee to recognize our thoughts and recommendations for the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Hong Kong and to protect the people of Hong Kong and the Canadians there in the city. In previous meeting, members of the Hong Kong diaspora groups such as Alliance Canada-Hong Kong, Canada-Hong Kong Link, VSSDM had appeared before you and had given you many recommendations to help the most people in need, in which I totally concur. One of the major critiques of the new immigration measures by the Government of Canada is it is merely an economic measure to attract the best and the brightest immigrants. To truly help the people of Hong Kong on a humanitarian basis and on shared universal value on a historical relations between these two places, we should focus on trying to help those being persecuted and harassed on a daily basis who does not qualify for the British scheme and provide them with a safe passage to Canada to seek asylum, work, or study in an expedited manner. Unfortunately, the current scheme is an utter failure to do so. To successfully achieve this purpose, it requires a change of mindset of policymakers and frontline staff implementing the policy. Canada must provide a flexible scheme to help the people, such as the 10,000 who have been arrested by doing nothing more than trying to hold the government accountable to the 1984 Joint Declaration, ensuring a free and autonomous Hong Kong for 50 years unchanged. This allows me to turn to two particular points in which I think previously witnesses had rarely mentioned. The first is the careful consideration of the number of resources that must accompany any new policy. And the second, the matter of integration of those who will soon arrive to a great country. Therefore, it is necessary to enhance the capability of our immigration department in accommodating and expediting the application process for political asylum, study permits, and work permits to Canada. In this, I have the following recommendation for this committee. Resources must be allocated to the Ministry of Immigration and Citizenship and to the Consulate General Office in Hong Kong for providing a provision of official information to target for the target audience in Hong Kong and those exiled elsewhere on the application of this new scheme and of political asylum, open work permit, and the open study scheme to seek refuge in Canada. In addition, the stationing of a special commissioner at the Consulate General's office in Hong Kong to be responsible for the processing and verifying and approval of urgent application for political asylum would be of great advance for this policy. And Madam Chair, it is of course easy to say that I will go and live in a new country, but this is often more easily said than done. Now, after we attract those new skilled immigrants to Canada, we must have an approach to the system in integrating to the Canadian way of life. On this, Canada must have a provision of integration programs enabling Hong Kong people who arrive in Canada to subscribe to Canadian values and to participate in all aspects of the Canadian community. Such program and project can be done in collaboration by the Canadian government with NGOs and well-established Canadian community organizations with a long history and track record of serving the Hong Kong Canadian community. These programs can henceforth help those who arrive in Canada to achieve employment and seek options to help during their settlement period. In the long term, become contributing residents to the diverse Canadian fabric. Madam Chair, Hong Kong is a clear example of China's aggression to challenge and pose threats to democracy and freedom. Providing an immigration route to Canada is a benevolent gesture from the Canadian government, but we must clearly define those most in need and help them accordingly. In places where we cannot intervene, we must speak out and speak the truth when a wrong is being committed. It is in standing firm on our principle that a free world will not further embolden an aggressor. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We will now go back to Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, you can please start. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you. I thank the committee for the opportunity to appear today. My connection with Hong Kong over the past 35 years has been principally as a professor of international relations and trans-Pacific affairs. My perch has been Canadian universities, frequent visits, and occasionally teaching courses in political science at the University of Hong Kong. I appear before the committee as an individual, not as a representative of my own university, the University of British Columbia, or the university system. The unfolding situation in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region has major implications for Hong Kong, Canada, and Canada-China relations. Previous witnesses, including Mr. Chan, have offered with urgency and precision informed recommendations for measures to address gaps in our efforts to assist those immigrants and refugees eager and, in many cases, desperate to leave for Canada. I won't add here to the list of recommendations, but instead address 3 additional matters that need to be part of our approach. First is understanding the setting. The national security law, increased surveillance, arrests and prosecutions, introduction of national education in schools and universities, censorship and self-censorship are all changing Hong Kong's political and social life in substantial ways. The one country, two systems model has shifted significantly towards one country. Hong Kong is being more closely integrated economically, culturally, and politically into the mainland. This is unlikely to stop or to be reversed. Many of my university friends are already adjusting to this mainlandization as the new normal. It is very difficult to get a sense of how many Hong Kong residents want to leave, when, and for what reasons. Some motives for leaving, including fear of arrest and prosecution for involvement in protests, as we have heard, disillusionment about Hong Kong's future, and livelihood calculations about future economic opportunities. The best guess is that unless civil order breaks down completely, unless there is large-scale violence or the economy collapses, the level of immigration to Canada, the UK, and elsewhere will not be unmanageable. Prospects of a mass exodus are small. The second matter I want to address is the expanded role of our universities. As the previous witness indicated, many people will be coming to Canada. Ottawa's new program puts a premium on educational connections for attracting and assisting Hong Kong immigrants. Our institutions, however, don't yet seem to be registering a sharp uptick of applications in universities and educational institutions. We need, however, to be gearing up in several areas on our campuses, enhancing student recruitment efforts and scholarship support, preparing incoming students from Hong Kong as well as mainland China for adhering to principles of respectful academic atmosphere. We need to be maintaining joint programs with Hong Kong academic partners, but with greater awareness that they may be under restrictions similar to those in our exchanges with mainland Chinese institutions. One area highlighted in earlier testimony and needs to be underscored is the need for increased vigilance and response in situations of harassment, intimidation, and improper surveillance of any student here in Canada. The third point is the longer game. Hong Kong will remain a point of friction in Canada-China relations for the long term. Issues related to dual nationality, the extraterritorial implications of the national security law, and a potential exit ban are going to top governmental agendas in the short term. Active individuals and communities in Canada will continue to push for democratic reforms and call out violations of the basic law and other human rights in a way
Sorry
that
for interrupting, Mr. Evans. Your time is up. You will get an opportunity to talk further in the round of questioning. We will now move on to our third witness for today's panel, Immigration and Refugee Board. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. I think Ms. Itritz will start, and you will be sharing your time with Ms. Premier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am joined today by Ms. Heather Primo, Director General, Strategic Direction and Corporate Affairs. I would like to start by thanking the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. Before jumping into the issues at hand, I would like to provide you with a brief overview of the Immigration and Refugee Board's mandate. For those of you less familiar with the IRB, we are Canada's largest independent administrative tribunal. Our mandate is to make well-reasoned decisions on immigration and refugee matters fairly, efficiently, and in accordance with the law. The IRB is made up of 4 separate tribunals known as divisions: the Refugee Protection Division, the Refugee Appeal Division, the Immigration Division, and the Immigration Appeal Division. It is the Refugee Protection Division, or RPD, that is responsible for hearing and deciding claims for refugee protection made in Canada. In keeping with our international legal obligations, as implemented through the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, RPD decision makers decide who is a convention refugee or a person in need of protection. In rendering decisions, RPD decision makers take into account whether an individual has a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, political opinion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. Decisions are made based on the merits of the specific facts presented in an individual case and in accordance with Canada's immigration laws. The IRB's role within Canada's refugee determination system, then, is to make decisions which conform to Canada's law. It is not responsible for developing Canada's policies and priorities as they relate to immigration and refugee matters. This is the responsibility of Canada's Department of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. The IRB recognizes that its decisions are always life-changing, impacting the lives and security of individuals who appear before it. To provide fair and efficient adjudicative justice, the IRB regularly monitors conditions in refugee-producing countries. The IRB has a world-class research directorate that produces national documentation packages on all countries from which the IRB receives claims, including Hong Kong. The NDPs comprehensively cover the human rights situations in the country, are updated regularly, and are publicly available. Based on the IRB's monitoring activities, all refugee claims from Hong Kong are currently being actively examined, and case management strategies are being utilized to promote their efficient determination. Namely, claims from Hong Kong have been identified for triage as part of the IRB's Task Force on Less Complex Claims. This means that, based on current country conditions, the IRB has identified claims made by Hong Kong nationals as suitable to be determined without a hearing or with a short hearing if there are only 1 or 2 key determinative issues to be resolved. If there are more complicated questions of credibility or identity, then such cases will not be able to be addressed as less complex, but will be decided with a regular hearing. This type of case management strategy is keeping with the IRB's past responses, relying on its knowledge of country conditions and claim types. Such strategies increase the efficiency of the refugee determination system by allocating an amount of preparation and hearing room time that is proportionate to the complexity of each unique claim. From January 1st, 2020 to February 19th, 2021, the RPD finalized 28 asylum claims from residents of Hong Kong, with less than 20 claims still pending. In the context of today's session, it is worth briefly examining the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, what it says about criminality. A foreign national may be inadmissible to Canada on the grounds of criminality. However, foreign convictions are examined to see whether they would be considered offenses under Canadian law if they had occurred in Canada. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the fact that the REB takes its responsibility to render all decisions fairly, consistently, and efficiently very seriously. And this extends to ensuring that it continuously monitors country conditions to ensure that each and every person claiming refugee status in Canada has access to meaningful adjudicative justice. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you. Thanks to all the witnesses for providing their opening remarks. We will now proceed with our round of questioning, and we will start with Mr. Chu. Mr. Chu, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questionings. You can please start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Mr. Henry Chan. You mentioned about Canada needs to expedite and the considerations of resources and receiving refugee coming from Hong Kong. I would like to ask you to share your thoughts on the potential infiltration of pro or hardcore Chinese immigrants coming from Hong Kong. Imaginably, our system is being a fair one. There could be ones who are pro-Chinese and who are being persecuted by the other side, and they would like to claim asylum in Canada.
Yes, I think in previous hearings, many witnesses have advocated, and I think it's very important that immigrants or political asylum seekers that come into Canada have to have a robust vetting system. That means perhaps our RCMP and our CSIS can do checkups on those people before they enter Canada. I think it's very important because of the recent news of Operation Fox Hunt all over Canada and of infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party over different places, not just Canada.
Now, the other point that you were suggesting is to expose the newcomers with Canadian core values, what is important to Canadians. Now, wouldn't you say that it's just another form of brainwashing, telling incomers like what we believe, and therefore if they don't agree, they can take a hike? What's your view on that?
Well, I think it's quite different. In China, if you were brainwashed at school or whatever, you can't really object. I think in Canada we can give them that opportunity. They don't have to. They don't have to necessarily take it, but it's there when they need it, and we have those programs that will be given to those who will come to Canada, and if they want, we can help them integrate.
Thank you. That's good. My two questions remaining would be for Professor Evans. Professor Evans, can you comment on the clash of civilizations? The Communist Party of China, the Communist Chinese Party, it's now taking a completely different road. They believe their system would actually work across the world, and therefore Canadian societies and Canadians and Western civilizations are actually the inferior. How do we maintain Canadian societal harmony given that narrative being permeated in Canada here?
Oh, I don't think that China wants to export its model to the world. I think that what China is trying to do is make its model safe inside its own country and its immediate periphery. As for seeing Chinese values, their political values, as superior or something we want to import, I think that's pretty unlikely for almost all Canadians.
Okay, thank you. Some may actually disagree with your first point there, but I'll leave that alone. The second question I have is regarding potential or actually detected reported infiltration and influence of foreign actors in Canada. You mentioned about in the university, we should try to keep the harmony of newcoming, not just Hong Kong students, but also students from mainland China. Now, how do we resolve any potential political clashes and also influence by certain actors behind the scene?
Well, it's a very important question because there are occasional examples of agents of the People's Republic of China, sometimes representatives from Hong Kong, paying a special attention to students on our campuses. And some of those contacts are quite understandable, but they need to be totally transparent. In situations where students are being threatened online or in physical, there need to be an awareness that that is unacceptable and that there will be reporting mechanisms that can be trusted to try to bring our intelligence and our policing services in if necessary. It's not a major problem during COVID when not many people are here on campus, but it is going to be something we have to gear up for in new and advanced ways in the come better circumstances.
1 minute left.
Okay, I'll leave the last minute then to the Immigration and Refugee Board. Let's see. My question to you, a very simple question, is you mentioned, I would like you to expand a little bit the what is equivalent to the double criminality. So the equivalent of criminal charges to a refugee seekers in Canada versus the place of origin, like Hong Kong. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great question. We look at foreign convictions to see whether they be offenses under Canadian laws if they had occurred here. So if there's no equivalent offense, the individual would be deemed to be admissible and to make a refugee claim. So, for example, there is no equivalent offense in Canada for participating in a peaceful protest. So a charge or conviction for having partaken in such
sorry
activities.
for interrupting, Mr. Idris. The time is up.
Yeah.
We will have to move on to our next member. We'll get an opportunity in the next round of questioning. We will now have Ms. Dillon. Ms. Dillon, you have 6 minutes for your round of questionings. You can please start.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. So I'll start with Mr. Henry Chan first. You mentioned in your statement that it would be important for the Government of Canada to enhance resources for the processing of asylum claimants, work and study permit applications to Canada. As it stands, our government has introduced new measures to expedite documents for Canadians and Canadian PRs in Hong Kong. And application processing fees have been waived for Hong Kong residents temporarily in Canada to extend their stay. There are also dedicated task forces at the IRB to speed up this process. Is this the type of prioritization you agree with? Thank you.
Yes, I agree with having new measures in to expedite those process. But I think one more thing about the resources is also the information. I have received a lot of feedback from the Hong Kong community is that there is not enough resources and information on the new scheme. So I think we can advance a little bit on that as well, on information.
Okay. And because one of the things our government considered in the development of the immigration programs set for the residents of Hong Kong was to examine the current immigration trends from Hong Kong and seek to strengthen those corridors already in existence and already being used. Do you believe that this choice is helpful for Hong Kongers and will be very, I guess, expedient? Thank you.
Yes, I think any new measures for Hong Kong would be helpful. And like I said, of course, there is even the best program, there's things we can critique. But I think more information is important again.
My next question is going to be for Mrs. Eatrids. It's important for our government and the people of Hong Kong both to have an ability to come to Canada. People from Hong Kong to come to Canada, but also that they should they choose to either on arrival or throughout their stay be able to apply for asylum. Can you please give the committee an understanding of what process is in place for applicants from Hong Kong and what processes their claims for protection are subject to once they reach with the IRB? Thank you.
Ms. Eatrids, you are on mute. Can you please unmute yourself? I'll stop the clock. Ms. Secrets is just trying to figure out.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem.
I apologize.
resume.
Time is precious, Madam Chair. So in terms of the process, the IRB only has jurisdiction to adjudicate refugee claims and appeals made within Canada. So we determine those refugee claims that are first determined eligible by either Canada Border Services Agency or the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Once they're determined to be eligible, once they're within Canada, then they are referred to the IRB and we can start the refugee determination process.
Thank you for that. I also have a follow-up question for you. For the expedition of documents for Canadians and Canadian PRs in Hong Kong and application processing fees being waived for those residents temporarily in Canada, do you find that there has been more expediency, I guess, with this and facilitating of the process and the way applications are being put through the system? Has this been helpful to those seeking to come to Canada? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a good question, but in terms of the IRB, we only deal with refugee claims that are made within Canada. So that would actually be the responsibility of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada.
1 minute left.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to put this question to everybody else, to all our witnesses on the panel, whoever didn't have a chance to answer. I'm very interested in hearing their comments. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think for the question, is it more helpful for or expeditious for the Hong Kong people? I think one of the things is that a lot of people that want to claim political asylum or are under tremendous harassment in Hong Kong cannot come to Canada because of travel restriction. And one of the things I think previous witness had mentioned is to provide essential travel documents for them to travel to Canada to claim asylum. And another thing is, I think...
sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now move on to Madame Normandin. Madame Normandin, you have 6 minutes. You can please proceed.
Merci beaucoup. Ma première question.
Thank you very much. My first question is for Mr. Evans and for Mr. Chan. Many witnesses before you spoke about the restrictive nature of the immigration measures. For example, the fact that they cover students, but not necessarily your average protester or someone who isn't bilingual. They've also spoken about travel restrictions. We know that the borders might eventually be closed for Hong Kongers wishing to leave Hong Kong. But some people in Hong Kong want to stay there because, for example, they don't want to abandon their family. What can be done to help those people? Because a witness mentioned something last week. They said that what would be even more effective than immigration measures would be to make sure that there was no persecution to begin with. Can you speak to us about that, please?
Monsieur Evans, vous êtes sur sourdine.
Mr. Evans, you are on mute.
That's, I think, a fundamental question. Is while we're talking about how we're going to assist people from Hong Kong as they come to our shores, the other question is, what do we do for the people of Hong Kong? And the idea that Hong Kong is on fire, that its system is collapsing, I think is misleading. I think that it's a place of deep political turbulence, but the city itself is there. And the question then becomes, how are we of most value? And our universities, rather than shutting down connections with Hong Kong, are really going to have to try to find more ways to connect with them, to do things in Canada that can't be done in Hong Kong. Publication, self-censorship restrictions in Hong Kong. We can live, we don't need to perform that way. We can do something a little better. And I think the fundamental issue is about how we try to encourage democracy and human rights in Hong Kong, even recognizing that we have little immediate influence. We need hope for and nourish the kind of emergence of a moderate democratic middle that can navigate the limited space for political change that still exists in Hong Kong. There are more opportunities in Hong Kong still than in mainland China. And let's not lose those connections through some rash action that'll have the PRC close the door even further.
Monsieur Chan?
I think
Mr. Chan?
action to solve the political atmosphere that is becoming very, very, very clouded in Hong Kong, but there is only limited things that we can do. So therefore, opening a route to asylum or to work or to study is for those who are really under tremendous harassment or under hardship to come to Canada. So it's not an easy question to answer because the political system in Hong Kong has been shifted. I think after the national security law, the fundamental of the Constitution, the basic law, the mini Constitution have been shifted, and even I think the Court of Final Appeal said that law cannot be interpreted by the Hong Kong courts. So there's very little that we can do, and I think offering an escape route for those who want to leave is very important.
Merci. Je vais faire du pouce sur ce que vous venez de me dire.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned offering avenues to immigration through the British scheme, through having NGOs helping these individuals. We have been looking into the situation with the Uyghurs. Can measures be punished by China? And even if our measures do trigger punishment, is it still worth it to go through with them?
Parliamentarians have had a busy China day already on genocide and Uyghurs. And I think we're at a moment where Hong Kong and Xinjiang come up as the examples of where we have deep concerns in Canada about human rights problems.
1 minute left.
The two situations are somewhat different. And I think that as hard as the situation is in Hong Kong now, there is still room for visibility, for transparency around actions, for us to work with Hong Kongers in trying to strengthen human rights and elements of democracy. In Xinjiang, that's even a more difficult case. But most people are going to stay in Hong Kong, and our future is with them in Hong Kong as much as it's going to be helping them when they're here in Canada.
Monsieur Chan?
Mr. Chan?
Very important that we notice that in Hong Kong, although there is a tremendous a crackdown on rights and freedoms, people can still, it's not as bad
Sorry
a
for
situation
interrupting,
as
Mr. Chan. Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. We will now move on to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you have 6 minutes. You can please start.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. My first question is to Ms. Etrid, if I may. The IRB between January 1st, 2020 to February 19th, 2021, finalized 28 asylum claims from residents of Hong Kong, with less than 20 claims still pending. Could you advise how many were rejected or refused?
That's a good question. I would first caution, though, that some of those claims were from 2018 to 2019 as well. So every claim is unique and determined on its own merits. We were averaging around 85% in terms of positive determinations of our claims to date. But I would say we look at every single claim based on claim types. Not all claim types from Hong Kong are around political opinion or democracy, but we were trending over 80% positive.
Sorry, could you give me a specific number? How many were rejected for residents of Hong Kong for this period?
Approximately 15%. That would approximately 15% were negative out of the 28 claims.
I see. Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure the percentage referred to what number. All right, thank you. In terms of the IRB decisions, has the IRB received any instructions from the government with respect to humanitarian or compassionate considerations for the people of Hong Kong?
Well, the IRB is an independent decision maker. So, when we look at our mandate, we have a research group that monitors on a daily basis developments with respect to country conditions. And so, we are live to contextual issues, but we do operate independently from the department and the minister.
So no directives has come from the government, correct?
We're independent of the government. So our decision makers are independent and we have institutional independence.
Okay.
We have...
thank you. I like to bring up the situation back in 1989 with Tiananmen Square. The government of the day issued a directive whereby it instructed this information to be taken into consideration, and that is that all persons who have in some way individually embarrassed their government, so referring to China, in so doing having exposed themselves to severe sanctions should they return. And so in view of this, all requests for permanent residence are to be evaluated sympathetically and on an urgent basis. That was the directive from the government of the day then. How would the IRB deal with such an instruction if it was given today to the IRB?
I wouldn't comment on that. We haven't received any official communication, and I really don't want to comment on speculation and what that would look like.
Yeah, I guess the important point, of course, that no instructions have been given, and there are similarities with what's going on with Tiananmen Square, what went on in Tiananmen Square versus what is going on right now in Hong Kong in terms of the urgency and the political implications for the people who face political persecution. I'd like to actually turn to the point around criminality. You raised the point, and it's been reiterated over and over again, and that is to say that on criminality, if the issue surfaces where it is a law.
If you can please, sorry for interrupting, if you can please adjust your mic.
I don't think it's
some
me.
echo puffing.
I actually don't think it's me, Madam Chair. I think it's someone else who's breathing very hard into the mic.
If I can request everyone else to please mute yourself. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. You can please proceed, Jenny. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope I don't lose my time.
No, I stopped the clock. Yes,
thank you. So on the question around criminality, so I want to raise this issue. For example, violations such as rioting, so this is pre-national security law, that would be deemed to be consistent with a law in Canada as well if you were charged with rioting. So for many of the protesters in Hong Kong, pre the national security law, they are faced with concerns around allegations of rioting. How would the IRB deal with those situations and that kind of criminality?
Right. Well, we look at decisions on a case-by-case basis with the most up-to-date evidence available. So under our Immigration Refugee Protection Act, we only exclude under Section 98 serious
1 minute left.
non-political crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity. So we would look at the current context and we'd look at it from a case-by-case basis.
I see. On the pre-removal risk assessment, between January and November of 2020, there were 94.5% of PARG decisions that were negative, 80 positive, 1,365 that were negative, and 605 applications withdrew. So for that period, do you know how many Hong Kong pre-removal risk assessments were received and received a favorable decision?
I wouldn't have the answer to that question. I only have data with respect to asylum claims that have come before the IRB.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Idris, your time is up. We will now move on to our second round of questioning. Before we start, just want to let everyone know we will have 4 minutes each for Mr. Chu and Mr. Dhaliwal, and 2 minutes each for Madame Normandian and Ms. Kwan. So we will now start our second round of questioning with Mr. Chu. You will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question goes back to Professor Evans. Professor Evans, you mentioned the word in Hong Kong. It is now being the process of mainlandization has actually accelerated. I would like to hear your view of the 300,000 Canadians who are actually estimated 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong right now, though it doesn't fall into the refugee kind of category. But I would like to hear your opinion in regards. Some of them may have a family who are not yet Canadians, permanent residents or immigrants. You're muted, sir.
Mr. Evans, if you can unmute yourself.
My sense is that there are a number, and I think it's a comparatively small number of people, of those 300,000, who at this stage are making the calculation they want to return to Canada in the near future. They may wish to as things develop, if that economy collapses, if the political situation deteriorates, if there is anything even approximating a Tiananmen Square style kind of violence, they'll want to leave. But many of those people are calculating their economic prospects, and the situation in Hong Kong on the economy is beginning to turn. One of the parts of mainlandization is the growing integration into a Chinese economy that is responding faster in a post-COVID world than ours are here. So the not all of those 200,000, 300,000 are going to be seeking refuge.
Thank you.
They'll be calculating.
But then just like all the hundreds of thousands, over 1 million estimated people with foreign passports, the point of these 300,000 Canadian passport holders are to provide political insurance should something occur. The latest interpretation of the nationality of the Chinese subjects has shattered their dream. So I wonder if that would actually cast more of these Canadians' relatives, say brothers or sisters, actually seek refugee status in Canada. Can you comment on that?
We don't know exactly how many are in that category, but I think that the dual nationality side is going to be a crucial issue going forward, as people are going to have to start making choices. It first refers to politicians and others in Hong Kong, but it is coming. The Chinese can tighten this one down in ways that will cause fear in the hearts of some. We may get some trying to come. We're also going to get a large number of people who will choose to be Chinese, not Canadian, if they're forced to do it because of their business, because of their connections and their languages. So yes, we have to be aware of this, but it's not likely to be a flood.
Thank you. My next question is
30 seconds left.
Oh, okay. In that case, then I will surrender the remaining of time to perhaps later on. I'll ask my 30 seconds question. Thank you.
You can ask now, otherwise we will not be going back.
My question, it will take at least 20 seconds for me to read the question, so don't worry about it. I'll just give it up.
Thank you. We will now move on to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 4 minutes for your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the presenters, witnesses that has come forward. Madam Chair, officials have told this committee that Hong Kong residents could come to Canada with an electronic travel authorization (ETA), which normally takes very little time to obtain it online, but under certain circumstances, this ETA is refused and person is required to undergo an interview at the visa office. My question will be this: will a protester that was arrested have difficulties in obtaining the ETA, and how difficult it is to get out of Hong Kong without the ETA? Anyone?
Your question is directed to whom?
Anyone? None?
Sure, I'll try to answer that. I think if you're asking how difficult it is to get out of Hong Kong without proper travel documents, is that it is very hard. We have been noticing and hearing that there have been increased surveillance in the borders, and as well, it have been very restrictive over after COVID. So I think it's very hard for people to get out without proper documents, and also those who have been arrested have been their travel documents have been confiscated, so they can't get out.
We have brought in many streams now when it comes to permanent immigration, and particularly my concern is to the students. I mean, if we can bring as many as students we could, because there is a lot more demand right now. Is there a way that government can help these students, because when they see the fees is important? Because I was hearing one of the fellows that came to my office and they said that it's very hard for students to afford. What can the government do in those particular circumstances where particularly the person want to go for a higher education and be productive citizen in Canada afterwards?
Perhaps I can try.
Sure.
A number of countries, not just Canada, have a special interest in attracting high-quality Hong Kong students to their institutions. And we can redouble our efforts on recruitment, maybe some scholarships. But I think something else we're going to need to be doing in Canada in particular, for those who want to leave Hong Kong for political reasons, is that we help them in our community colleges and other parts of our educational system, where we can give new facilities for English language training. High-end Hong Kong students can go anywhere in the world, admission-wise, but there's a category on the technical side and others where we could make a special effort, maybe some scholarships, but particularly what to do when people are going to need the extra time to fit into English language. Not everyone who comes from Hong Kong can operate in English. And that might be one niche where some government encouragement and university and colleges initiatives can open a door a little bit wider to a class of Hong Konger who is not going to be caught up in the normal high-end educational stream.
I totally understand,
Mr. Dhaliwal, your time is up. We will now move on to Madame Normandin. Madame Normandin, you have 2 minutes for your questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have one question for Ms. Eatrids. You spoke about the fact that some refugee claims were processed this year, but dated 2018. And we know how the processing time for the RPB can be long. For the paper claims and the in-person hearings that only started in July, up until mid-September, the number of cases that were processed in person are only about at half the level, the pre-COVID level at the RPD. Even if we're not expecting a massive flow of claims, are you ready to receive them? And where does the RPD stand in terms of its workflow?
Question. We are Hong Kong claims have an average processing time of about 11 months, and that was slowed down because of the pandemic. But we are operating now at our annualized capacity of $50,000, 50,000 claimants. We had received a cash injection from the government, and we've built up extra capacity. We've done over 7,000 virtual hearings. We've had over 4,000 paper decisions since April 1st, which is the beginning of our fiscal year. So I'm confident that we are operating now at our funded capacity and that we have a process in place with our less complex claims force to be able to efficiently case manage, and as well additional operational measures in case there's a larger influx.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will have Ms. Kwan. We will end our round of questioning with Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you have 2 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please start.
My question is to Mr. Henry Chan. From our last panel, we actually were advised by Ted Hu that the government is about to the Hong Kong government is about to bring in legislation that will prevent people from boarding a plane and a boat without any reason at all. So time is of the essence for people to get to safety. I wonder if you can comment on that, given the projection of the government's announcement right now, even on the immigration measures that they've announced for students, they would actually not kick in until likely towards the end of the year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, Ed, I agree with you. Time is of essence. There are a lot of people that are being persecuted, and there are new people being arrested every single day. And once you're arrested, your passport or your travel documents are held, so you can't leave. So it's very important that we do have these things in a timely manner, as I said in the speech earlier.
With respect to travel restrictions, even if people were able to successfully put in an application, travel restrictions because of COVID right now will not allow them to get into the country. Do you think that the government should lift the travel restrictions for Hong Kongers?
Yes.
Related to this issue, with respect to travel, part of the issues is that there are no refugee claims that would be allowed to be made in Hong Kong. Should we have a special provision that would allow for refugee claims to be made for the people of Hong Kong who are abroad?
Yes, and I think a lot of those people, as a previous witness has mentioned, are on almost a refugee-like status. So we need more help for those people as well who are exiled elsewhere.
Should the Canadian Embassy be utilized to facilitate this process?
Yes, and like I said, a special commissioner to take a look at those.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chan. The time is up. And with this, I want to thank all the witnesses for giving us the time and providing important testimonies to this study. Thank you to all the members for adjusting your calendars. I know on a very short notice and coming in the morning and doing 1 hour of panel in the morning. So with that, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.